Yo, what's up, you guys? This video is gonna be about Engineer. So the Engineer, more specifically Engineer DPS. Why Engineer? Because that's the meta right now. So the previous video was about Summoner. That's the meta class for the healer role, and then for DPS, the meta right now for this patch, going forward into 12.0 and a whole while during 12.0, it's gonna be Engineer and Priest. So Priest is probably going to be the next video, but for now we're going to go over Engineer. So Engineer DPS is something I'm playing for a while now as well. It's kind of my main class because I've been playing support a lot before DPS became meta. So I thought like I'll be pretty comfortable making an Engineer DPS class guide. So let's start off right off the bat. First of all, we're going to go with Acid Shot rank 3, of course, because it's a damaging thing. Basically, we're always going to focus for maxing out our damage abilities because the role mainly is always DPS. Next to that, we always take Grape Shot, rank 3 as well, because we'll need to rotate between cooling the reactor here at the bottom and heating the reactor always to 200, and then pushing that heat away with Reactor Blowdown. This is our strongest single target DPS ability. We'll be using it quite a lot. As you can see, it does blah 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 damage if you hit it to 200, and it does about the same damage, -3. Not sure what the difference is, but then it does basically the same damage when you cool it to 200, and then sets the reactor back to 0 after using this ability. With the Ruby, it's gonna become much more stronger, but for now we're gonna stick to the talent build. Light turrets recently got really buffed by a lot, by exactly 115% more damage done. So we're definitely taking this one because this is a beast for most bosses, especially single target. 2 targets and 3 targets is light, so it's still good. When you have 4 or more monsters that are going to be alive for, let's say, 30 more combat seconds or longer, then we're going to go for acid turrets. So we'll be having both turrets rank 3 in this build. Then the bombs. I'm still doubting about the bombs. The bombs are really necessary to have because of the debuff. But I think their rank doesn't have to be as high as rank 3 because the damage of them isn't... You're not using bombs that often, you just use them every, I believe, 14 seconds or something per bomb. So for now we're gonna do rank 2 for both, depending on how many talent points you guys have. Then we have medical emergency, rank 1. Medical emergency does nothing basically, you only is useful with the Ruby. We'll get there later. For now we're going to take rank 1 so you at least have it, but the higher the rank goes, the lower the cooldown, which really might be useful for most of us. Then we take Shocker rank 1, so we have a crowd control at least, that will help us a lot in PvE such as Heroics. Of course we go Aspect level 3, so we do some decent damage. We go for Toxic Volley rank 3, we do this because this one deals, as you can see, 13,000 damage, and this one does 6,000, so it's literally doubling our damage for the acid shots. And obviously you don't put this on your skill bar, you remove this. So you have a good one, this 13k per shot, and this is also 13k per shot. So these are finally equal. Then we take Paralyzing Ray rank 1, just so you have a long CC that you can precast at all times. If something ever goes wrong, you can use this to take control in the PvE area, or when a monster goes loose and starts to kill people or something. Then Acid Turret, like I said, we go this rank 3. You can see damage in tooltip here says 3k, 3.5k damage actually every 2 seconds, and then light turret is 8k, 8.5 every 2 seconds. So it's more than double of that from acid turret, which is really good. Then we go for... We don't take the buffs because we're not support obviously. And for some people might be surprised, but we're not taking Burst of Mana. This is basically an AoE ability that's doing nothing except unless you have these rubies. We don't have enough rubies to take these rubies, so we're not gonna go for that. Our only AoE is gonna be destructive shots and red alert, but that'll be plenty, and acid turret as well, but that'll be plenty for us. So we might take concentrate depending on how many talent points you have left, because it's useful on some bosses and some mobs, but usually the spelling is the job of the support, so we're gonna skip it for now and only take this when you have talent points left over. Next up you have Iron Curtain. This is our defensive ability that's actually most valuable to do. As you can see, rank 1 is 30% mitigation, 4 seconds. Rank 2, 5 seconds mitigation, 45%. and then in rank 3 6 seconds 60%. So we really need this on rank 3 to be actually valuable for something. As you can also see, the cooldown decreases as rank goes up, so you need this rank 3, no going around it. Then Spider Suppressor, we put this rank 3 as well because it's a less cooldown, and I believe the range, yeah, you see the radius 5, rank 2 7, and then on rank 3 10. So the radius increases as the rank goes up. This is important because it's going to become one of our grouping up abilities that's going to group up the mobs. And thanks to Rubies, we're going to be able to use this as an AoE crowd control, which is really helpful. And it will be reset with reload, which means you can do this twice in a row, which is really good. And then there's one more Ruby that's going to increase the damage that we should deal after using Spider, which is another plus bonus. Then, like I said, Red Alert. Now, if you don't have enough talent points, you can leave this on rank 1. The only thing ranking up does is reducing the cooldown, nothing else. So the higher the rank of your Red Alert, the more often you can actually use it in PvE. Now, I'm saying this, there's also something else happening, so the debuffing lasts longer, but that's more for PvP. You're never going to use this for PvE because the debuffs don't even apply in PvE. So we're going to leave this on rank 1 for now. And then Colossus, we obviously go rank 3 here because damage does increase here for Colossus, and it increases also on the lifetime of the Colossus, increases with your tier of the dragon quality. So the better the quality of your tier is, the more combat time your Colossus is going to be, and that's going to be really helpful because for every second counts for Colossus that is in combat. So when we learn these abilities, we have 14 talent points left. Then I would go for simply more damage. Now Red Alert is gonna be 2 minutes ahead, so you're gonna save nearly 3 minutes when you put this to rank 3. And then we do our bombs to rank 3 as well because it obviously does more damage. And then we can put our medical up, I would say, because medical less cooldown would be really good for the AoE purifying. So then we have rank 2 only. Utility would be more important than reducing the cooldown by 1 minute 20 on Red Alert, I believe. So I'm gonna go with medical emergency 55 seconds, and then thanks to reloading it, we can use it twice in a row as well. So that's how it's gonna look like for now. And then we have 1 talent points left. I'm gonna go for concentrate, so we have a dispel. It's an insta cast, as you can see, so there's no cast time, which is great. It just has a long cooldown, but nevertheless I can use it in case of an emergency that we need to dispel something. So that's that. So that's the talent tree here. Then we go for the rubies. Obviously we go for stats first with proficiency. So grid 1 cannoneer, we go for proficiency here. Then we go for the physical damage that increased. Now physical damage is gonna be a lot of things. This reactor blowdown is gonna be tricky because this is doing 2 damage types, as you can see. When you see the red colored 200, that means it's physical damage. So when you heat up the reactor, you're doing physical damage with the blowdown. When you're cooling down the reactor and use blowdown, the damage type will be natural, like acid/disease natural. Same goes for acid bomb. It's acid, as you can see, the element, and then frag bomb is physical, heats it up, and then grape shot, also heating up, is physical, and then toxic volley, acid, is cooling down the reactor, is, like I said already, acid damage. Basically, cooling down the reactor on engineer results into acid damage, and heating up the reactor as an engineer is using physical damage. So that's where this comes in, and the blowdown really does a lot of damage with physical because of these rubies. So we go for this. Then cannonade, acid bomb or frag bomb increases the damage over next 3 volleys by 2100, 4200, 6300. So what this does is we're gonna use our aspect here because we have again aspect requiring rubies here. So when we use this thingy, you see this buff we get here called cannonade, and then whenever you use a shot, you will see here that it does multiple shots here because it simply adds up to another damage type. Now when you fire without the buff, it only does 1 attack. As you can see, that's what that does. Then we have improved heat exchange. This doesn't need an aspect, but your volleys increase temperature by 30 degrees. In aspect of support, your volleys inflict 30% more damage. This is irrelevant for us, but we really want this extra temperature increase, because right now when you do one shot, the reactor goes only 40 up, 80, 120, 160, 200. So it takes us 5 shots to get full in order for us to do reactor blowdown. 5 shots means 5 global cooldowns, and a 6 global cooldown is a reactor blowdown. That takes way too long to get to our really high single target damage. When we take both of these, it's 60. 60 plus 40 is 100. So when we learn these, you will see 100, 200, and you're full. 2 global cooldowns instead of 6 reduces it by 300%. So when it's full, you can do reactor blowdown already. 1, 2, reactor blowdown, and so on and forth. So you have way more frequent reactor blowdowns, which is really your biggest hitting ability. No, not for now, because we don't have all the rubies yet, but it will be our biggest hitting ability. Next up, we go for the experimentalist, the stamina increase. We always want more stamina. More stamina is playing safe, and dead people don't do DPS. That's basically the golden rule we go with. So you want to stay alive during fights, so you take the stamina rubies. Forced pressure, also again an aspect of assault requires ruby. Each shot inflicts so much more percentage damage. It ends up at 50. So basically your volleys, your toxic volley and your grape shot are gonna do 50% more damage now. So that's a raw bonus. Of course, the vigor increase, like I explained on the previous video, vigor is your main base stat that goes over how much damage and slash healing you do. So really important to have vigor as high as you can. Then everything else here is for support, so we're gonna skip all this, and then we go on this side. Destruction principle, damage over time dealt by you and your devices is increased by 10%. This is mostly going to be effective for your turrets that you drop, so your light turrets or your acid turrets are simply going to deal more damage in combat while they're shooting and firing and whatnot. The damage over time dealt, that's only going to be applying to your bombs. I've also been told that the destructive shots is regarded as a damage over time, but I never really managed to test that myself. But regardless, you need rubies anyway for the turrets that you have. Next up, we have variable polarity. Again, an aspect required ruby. Your volleys apply the variable polarity effect to the target, which stacks up to 3 times and increases the damage of your next burst of mana or reactor blowdown by X amount of per stack. So what this does is, we'll see, let's learn this together what it does. So whenever you use a volley, which is basically toxic volley or grape shot, you will see that this is being applied, variable polarity. This is increasing the damage of your reactor blowdown, depending on how many stacks it can get. Now it stacks up to 3 times, but in reality you're only going to use 2 of them, because you're always going to do 2 shots, 1, 2, reactor is full, so you blow down and it's going to be gone. You'll basically never go to 3 stacks. Yeah, it used to be up to 5 stacks back in the day, but they've changed it now to 3 stacks. I'm not sure what the reason is behind that, but this basically just adds bonus damage to your reactor blowdown because you're doing volleys in your rotation, which we get to later on in the video. Next up, radiation background. When your volleys hit a target under the shrapnel or acid spit, those are 2 buffs that are being applied by your bombs. They apply the radiation background effect, which deals damage over time basically. So this is also something, I don't think this really makes a big difference in damage actually, but this obviously gets buffed as well because of these rubies, and I'm always used to taking these, but the damage impact of these are minimal, but there's still more damage than not having any of these, so we're grabbing that as well. And then we have peak of efficiency. Your volley increases the damage of your devices by 13%. So that's really good to have. Oh, obviously have to do as. So I'm gonna quickly show you guys radiation background when you use the bomb. And then, as you can see here, the volley during the bomb debuff applies radiation background, which is the damage over time. And then you have peak of efficiency. Here your volley increases the damage of your devices by about 40% for 6 seconds. As you can see, every time you fire with a volley, this buff reapplies, which is really good and easy to keep up. all the time. So lots of buffs are going on during the combat. That's everything for grid number 1. Moving on to grid number 2. First of all, we have overload here. After using reactor blowdown, you will gain the overload effect that will increase damage dealt by you and your devices by another 4, 8, 12% for 10 seconds. So basically every time you do reactor blowdown here, you're also getting this buff on top of your rotation. Also increases damage done by your devices and by yourself, which is everything you do. So this is going to be up all the time and it's going to buff everything you do. Then we have particle acceleration, which is the degree of heating or cooling your reactor, so whatever you do, it doesn't matter. The damage of the blowdown is increased by 1%. So we know that this goes up to 200, means the damage done by blowdown is increased by 200%, which is tripling the damage basically. Really strong. And then we go 2%, so 2%, 400, 500% more damage on reactor blowdown just because of these rubies. Pretty broken. Then next up we have here our supremacy rubies. I was about to say swiftness from back in the day. So supremacy for engineer is not that great. Increased damage of reactor purging. Reactor purging is bad translation, it means reactor blowdown. And burst of mana, and the damage of mechanisms, actually called devices, so another bad translation. But we're not really using this because from all the tests we've done, and also knowing how much value you get per stat point, I'm not using this stat. I'm only using luck and base stats. And when drop window is about to hit, I would say drop the luck altogether and simply go for base stats. That's how you're gonna get the biggest result in damage meter. But of course feel free to test yourself and see if you can do any better, because testing is what brings you higher. So supremacy, we're taking these rubies. Well, we're not gonna take them for now. We're gonna take them when you have rubies left over, because they add more stats that are going to affect your damage compared to somebody that doesn't have them, but only when you have nothing else to take. Now, duration of effects that inflict damage over time is reduced by 15% and the damage is increased by 30%. So this is a good one for your dots, but since you don't have that many dots, except for that radiation background and the bomb, but actually really the bomb here 6 seconds and the other one also 8 seconds, so that's 6 seconds duration. This is 8 seconds. When we take these rubies, I believe the duration should decrease by 30%, and it does do that. That's back to 4 and that's 5. So yeah, the damage here basically it pushes more damage in a shorter QT duration, so that pushes up DPS that way. So that's good to have. Then we have here biohazard. Natural damage increases by 18%, like we said at the beginning. Natural damage is everything you do with cooling, so toxic volley, the acid bomb, and then reactor blowdown with 200 cooling. Those are acid damage. And then you have projectiles. Projectiles is where your damage really is gonna help a lot. Whenever you use basically one of the bombs, they're gonna apply 3 debuffs, and then when you use the opposite shot on those bombs, you're gonna do a lot more extra bonus damage on top, and increases their damage by 90%. So when you do a heat bomb, basically a bomb that generates heat, you have to redo aspect again. So when you use a acid bomb, and now of course we do blowdown because the reactor is full, you see that you got these debuffs here. Then you have to attack these debuffs with the opposite of what bomb you used. So we used acid bomb, that's cooling. So the opposite of cooling is heat. So we need to use the heat, which is the grape shot attacks. And you see that it uses one of the stacks and it does 90% of your volley damage on top of its bonus damage. So that is how that works. So you do heat bomb, reactor blowdown, and then you use the opposite of the bomb you used. We use here heat bomb, applies heat stacks, and we use volley cooling volley damage, acid damage basically, to use those stacks. If you use grape shot on the stacks, it's not going to use them because it says you need to explicitly use the opposite. Well, it tells you exactly what you have to use, but basically it's the opposite effect of the bomb that you throw it. Then gravity whirl, With a 33% chance, every enemy within the range of spider pressure will be pulled towards the spider and will be disoriented for 3 seconds. That's our AoE CC from spider here. And by going to rank 3, we have a 100% chance that it's CC'd for 3 seconds, which is a good long CC. And on aspect of assault, with a 100% chance, victims of the ability will also take 20% more damage from engineers for 6 seconds, which is really good. The only downside to this is that, as far as I have known so far, it's been bugged and it doesn't really work. But basically, you see here, the next problem is also that it's like such a small icon compared to your own buffs are always bigger and somebody else's buffs are always smaller. So I'm assuming it has to do with that the game doesn't recognize it's your buff, so it's not applied to you or anyone else that I know for that matter. Yeah, so that's that. Just take it already for the CC it does, because you're gonna need to use the CC quite a lot and you're gonna be thankful for it. And when they actually fix this and it does work, then it's a big bonus. And of course, don't forget to nuke right after you use spider, because 20% is gonna be a big boost to your burst. And the next up, we're gonna take here explosives rank 1. We can go for more because it's only your bombs damage that increases by 10, 20, 30%. It's not that much. Like I say, we don't use bombs that often, except every 18 seconds. Yeah, so that's quite long. So we're gonna use this to get to our destructive shots, and destructive shots is our AoE ability. Now the damage in the tooltip is quite high. I believe this is a bug. I'm not sure. It just looks unreal. But so for 8 times, it's gonna do this for 8 seconds basically, doing damage all the time. As you can see, the damage isn't as high as it says in the tooltip, so it's quite confusing. But it's really good because it also makes you immune against CC. So when a monster or an AoE is gonna happen where it also CCs you, for example the third boss on Fenia Cloister, you can use this to counter that so you don't get CC'd. Or for example the dragon boss in OBS where you get stunned for doing those dragon hits, you can also use destructive shots here to avoid the stun that you're gonna get. Now ranking up doesn't increase cooldown, it only increases the damage it does. That's pretty good. And for aspect of support, it refreshes the battle support effect every time it applies the damage. So when you have Variance up, for example, or power, and you use this ability, it's gonna refresh that buff every second until it stops casting this ability, which is really good for supports. It may allow support engineers to do a lot more damage that way for AoE on top. So we have destructive shots rank 1 here. We're gonna rank it up when you have rubies left over. Just be sure you have rank 1 because it's a really good ability for AoE. Next up, grid number 3. We're gonna go for increased energy absorption. That means that the lifetime of our turrets here are going to increase. You can see here that it's 18 seconds when I dropped it, I believe. 20 seconds actually. So when we have this 20 seconds plus 40%, this is running out, so now it's 28%. Yeah, and that's correct. So that's a lot. That's 8 seconds longer where they can fire more shots, and considering they fire 1 shot every 2 seconds, I believe, it is 4 more shots per turret, so adds a lot of more damage. Then damage of attacking devices is increased by 24%, so more buffs for the turrets. And then here we have light turret and acid turret firing rate is increased by 20, 35 and 50%. That means they're gonna do firing every 1 second instead of every 2 seconds. So that's another big buff. Basically it doubles the damage because it halves the cooldown they have with firing. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. No, it's for every 1 second, so that's good. That's really good. Then we go for here, extraction. This is the ruby you need to give life to medical emergency, because right now medical does completely nothing. It's just healing, and the healing isn't worth anything because we're in the DPS pack, so it really is useless. But then when you take this ruby, this makes it interesting because when activated, so basically when used, it removes 1 negative effect from every ally within 40 yards. So that's an AoE Fury in a big ass range of 40 yards. Afterwards, Medical Emergency has a 10% chance to remove one more negative effect from all allies within range. Meaning, if we have this rank 1 and we use our medical, it's going to purify everything that it has, guaranteed. And then for every time it's still alive, it has 10%. For every second it's still alive, it has 10% to purify another debuff if the allies were to have another debuff. Now going up in ranks only increases the chance of this happening up to 50%. Now I've been using with rank 1 for a long time, because the only thing that really matters is using this on the initial thing, and it's been enough for me. So that's good on rank 1, and that's where we can leave it at. Qualified mechanic, the maximum number of simultaneously operational devices increases by 2. But what happens when you reach basically your maximum devices? It's gonna remove your existing devices. And I believe when I use one right now, the other one despawns. So we're gonna see here in 3 seconds. So this one's supposed to live for another 8 seconds here. So we're gonna be able to use lighter before this one expires. Yeah. So the base is 2 devices. That's how many devices you can have up by default. And then by having this Ruby, you can have 4 devices active, which is basically going to be usually all your turrets, because you'll be able to have 4. But then Colossus is also counted as a device, I believe, and so is medical. So when you have 4 devices up and there happens something that you need to use medical for a boss fight, we're going to do one more light turret here to show you. So we have 4 devices up, and then we do medical right after. You see that your 1 turret instantly disappears. You're basically you're basically losing DPS because you had to purify somebody of your party or a mechanic. So we need to get the reload anyway. So you're going to have 6 devices here that you can have, and 6 devices is all you need, because you have your 4 light turrets up, and then you're gonna have your Colossus up, and then if you have to have it, you can still use medical. So that is 6 devices, and nothing gets despawned along the way. So that's all you need for DPS. You can go up to even more devices, but I have no clue why you would even do that. Then reload, like I said, the ability of the abilities. Now I believe people for back in the day, this is the ability that you could use as engineer to reset the abilities on your ship when you were on the Visitor, which was really OP, and they quickly removed that from the game because it was breaking Astral and it was requiring Engineer. It was a completely different days back then. So reload, the Engineer reboots all control systems, instantly resetting the cooldown of all devices except Colossus. Obviously Colossus would be too OP, but when you have basically your devices here at cooldown and use reload, it resets the cooldown and you can use them once more. Really useful to use multiple medicals. Usually it's used for the medicals. We're never gonna really use it for your light turrets to stack up 5 for those few 8 seconds until the other one expires. Unless you want to switch from light to acid turret, you can then use this after using light turret, and you see that your monsters are dying quickly. Or basically, sorry, you're starting with acid turret, you're building up acid turrets, and you see that the amount decreases to 3 or less. And you want to switch to light turret, you would use reload to quickly switch to light turret that way. That's also something you could do. Anyway, moving forward, we have here support, so that's not for us. We have here a pretty important Ruby to have if you don't want to fuck up in heroics. Heat signature. Basically, your reactor blowdown is going to apply a debuff here that's going to be a target range, so a heat signature, so that your devices knows which one to prioritize to DPS. Useful especially when you're DPSing in heroics and you have a lot of monsters going on, but you have long CC monsters and you don't want to break their long CCs, then that's the Ruby you really want to have. The same applies for raiding when you do certain raids and you have to long CC certain mobs, because otherwise you get your raid raped when zerging it. Really useful ability to have it like this. Next up, we have Mechanical Cycle, reduces the cooldown of your critical mass, power barrier, and teleportation abilities. Those are these three abilities at the bottom here. You have teleport, you have power barrier, and you have critical mass. Now the most useful ones for us are teleportation and critical mass. Power barrier is not bad, but it's losing a lot of its potential because you're not on support. As a support player, It's really good, and then critical kill mass is kind of meh, but basically it reduces the cooldown, meaning reduces cooldown of critical mass here 45 seconds, and then it decreases by 25%, which is a lot. And this increases your damage done by 25% for 12 seconds. That is a lot of damage increased. Damage dealt by your devices is not increased, so what is this really used for? For dropping red alert and going destructive shots. That really increases your damage done a lot by these abilities. Of course the other abilities as well, but this is going to be less impactful because you're spamming those abilities all the time already anyways. So it's especially used for AoE bursting. And then we have progressive defense, which is reducing your incoming damage by 7, 14 and 21%. These are the same rubies you find back on Bard but with a different name. Now I'm gonna skip these for now because I don't really need them. If you have the rubies right now, I would recommend you to take these rubies because they're pretty good to survive, just like with the stamina ones. But I'm gonna go prioritize DPS, and then we have 6 rubies we're gonna have left over. We're gonna be short on rubies to have everything that we want to have to be optimal as an engineer. But basically more damage comes from increasing here the supremacy stats. Really want these rubies here, and then we only have 3 rubies left, which is gonna be a tough choice of the destructive shots or increasing the bombs, or if you want the damage mitigation. Those are the only choices we can have. And I believe I'm gonna go with this to have optimal damage and less progressive defense. Although I believe this isn't as effective, so I'm gonna go with this, like so. And destructive shots. It's nice to be like dick measuring your DPS, but I believe engineer's main job is not to AoE, so we're gonna prioritize it like so. Maybe we're gonna balance it a bit so that you don't die for sure. Maybe this is better, this is safer as well. If you have more rubies, of course it's way better if you have more rubies, but this is the best thing we can do with what we have for now. So that is for the rubies and the talent points. Next up we're gonna go for the stats. So for stats, I reset my stats so I can completely build up with you guys. So first of all, like I said, supremacy is not gonna be focused with your stats that we have. We just have the bonus from the rubies, because it does increase our damage by 7.2%, and that's a number you don't want to leave lying around. The next up we have proficiency, determination and brutality. Now depending on the buff you're gonna play with from your support, you wanna adjust to that. Usually I play with this ratio, so about the same proficiency and brutality. Now to make it actually the same, you wanna go like this. So like so, because I'm doing 40 more because I have 40 for my potion, so you need to calculate that in. So those are the same now, and then you have the determination. Push this into proficiency, and then we can probably start arranging our stats. So we want to go for equaling stats like so. We're gonna round it up, or round it up so it's all equal. Now our proficiency here for in this example has 40 more from the effect bonus from our potion, so we're gonna calculate that in, so that's 40 extra. So all of them are equal now, and when you do like this, your determination is gonna get buffed from Valiance because that's your highest stat. So when your support has a Valiance buff that's gonna be buffed, it's going to increase determination instead of anything else, which is what you want to happen because determination is the best stat for DPS. Of course we have more stats left over, so we're gonna do 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and then the rest in here. That way we're optimizing our damage for Valiance buff. Now you can also save that as your preset for Valiance, for example, and then I have a preset for solo and just PvP DPS. You can also make one for power, which would look different, and then you could have one for solo as well. For solo, I would simply move one gear piece from proficiency to determination, one gear piece from brutality to determination as well. So I would say the brutality here, like so, and then look for proficiency, yes, and you move one from determination, like so. And I would use this for solo content. Now for defensive stats, you would go for 500 caution, between 500 and 750. Play with what you prefer the most. I'm fine with 500 for now. Also because they've nerfed caution by a lot recently. And then you will go for Bloodlust and Vitality. Now Bloodlust is important to have because it's the only thing that heals you up. As you can see, I have Bloodlust on every possible item piece except for my head, because I think above 1500 is way too much. I believe even as you can see, we have, let's say, 1500 for 11.7%. If we drop Bloodlust here for more caution, right? So if we drop our Bloodlust to caution, see, we're going to 1000 here, and we're at 9.26%. So we dropped 500 stats for only 2% of healing. I believe 1000 in the soft cap, so I wouldn't go above 1000 Bloodlust really. So 1000 Bloodlust would be the maximum I would advise, especially when you're lacking stats, and then you can maximize your vitality from that caution that you got, because I dropped my Bloodlust. So optimally 1000 Bloodlust maximum, as you can see here, between 500 and 750 caution, and then everything else in vitality you can maximum have, which is what I do. Always the pants, belt, boots, the 2 weapons, the 2-hander and the wand, and then the earrings and the necklace. Those are the only vitality items everyone ever has, so make sure to have those on vitality. And their stat. So that's everything for your stats. For stats, so I run right now, if it's pre 12.0 is luck. I want to go for 500. I have here 40 bonus from the guild, so it's hard to measure with, but I'm rolling with it as it is right now. But when 12.0 hits, I would advise to remove luck and figure out if your damage is better that way or not, and see from there. But I believe right now this is what works best for me. And that's everything for the stats really. Next up we go to the gameplay. So we're gonna show the gameplay rotation in our Trial of Blood training. So during combat you always spam your turrets, so you get your turrets up. And then what you wanna do for the Engineer DPS is basically always use your bombs when off cooldown, and use your reactor blowdowns every time you have 200 heat or cooling. So that's the first rule you always want to do. And then you want to do your volleys always in pairs of 2. So it's either 2 toxic volleys, reactor blowdown, of either 2 grape shots and reactor blowdown. You're never gonna mix them up, otherwise you're gonna fuck up the damage by a lot. So always during combat you want to spam your turrets, so that your turrets spawn always during combat. And then next thing you want to do, as you can see here, I'm always spamming in pairs of 2. So it's either 2 toxic volleys and then a reactor blowdown, or it's 2 grape shots basically and then a reactor blowdown. Now depending on which ability you use, you will see that your reactor either cools or heats up, and then you can use reactor blowdown. You will see here reactor blowdown is going to have 2 damage types here. You have the acid type, and then you have the physical damage type. As you can see, physical damage does a lot more than the acid type. And why does this matter? Is because when you're idling in your rotation, it's better to use the physical type than the acid type. That's the rotation that you want to go for. Now you want to use always bombs as well. So what happens with the bombs is you're using them off cooldown, and you'll see these stacks apply where they give bonus damage to your volleys. You always want to do 2 shots. You'll see it uses 1 stack of each and then reactor blowdown. And then when I switch to the other one, because that's going to use 2 of the other stacks and then reactor blowdown. If you use twice or 4 times basically the same volley, you're going to end up using only 1 of these bonuses for the second pair of volleys, which is going to be less DPS damage per second, then the other volley would consume 2 stacks, of course. You can also stack these projectiles buff from the Rubies by using multiple bombs. Then we go to 6 stacks from 2 bombs. Be able to really work well with double attack. When double attack was still a thing, and you would use the opposite bomb, it would literally use multiple stacks. And of course, when double attack procs with your bomb, it would apply double the stacks as well. But now going to the third bomb, it only increases to 8, so it's only adding 2 more stacks instead of 3. So I believe 8 stacks is the maximum you can get. And then when we do another bomb, it no longer increases the stack, so 8 is the maximum you can get. But you're basically never gonna get there because you're always using dual stacks during your rotation. The only way you're gonna get up to like 6 stacks of one is when you use the stuck shots in between, because that's quite a long channel time. But that's really it. Otherwise, you're never gonna reach that amount of stacks. So basically, your DPS rotation is gonna look like you wanna do bombs to get those both on cooldown real quick, and then use 2 shots of the same to remove the stacks, 2 shots of the other one to remove those stacks, and then of course use the 2 stacks again to consume the last ones. By then you're gonna have really low cooldown on these bombs. You're gonna have 1 global cooldown left to use before you can use the next bomb again. What I usually do is then always use the next shot of my next bomb that's gonna be off cooldown. In my case, it's gonna be my frag bomb. It's gonna be off cooldown, so I'm gonna do 1 grape shot so that I can follow up with my heat bomb. I'm doing it that way because I'm gonna have insta heat then, so I can use Rector Blowdown. If I were to do the same situation where I use toxic volley and the next is my frag bomb, you will see it's gonna do from -100 because cooling to +200 because of the bomb. It's gonna go to 100 heating. I can't use Rector Blowdown, so that would mean I would have to spend another global cooldown for Grape Shot in order to get 200 heat and then use Rector Blowdown, which results in losing a global cooldown of good damage, so you're basically losing out of DPS. That's the theory behind it. It can be tricky, I suppose, but you'll get it when you play it, how that works. Now for people that are going to be more advanced in this, you will see that your global cooldown, you won't have this in the first because you're going to use Master Plan to buff up the Colossus you drop, which we get to in a second. But that's going to end up with you using exactly just 2 more shots before the bomb is off cooldown. Now the bomb will be off cooldown while Rector Blowdown is as well, but you want to go bomb first. Rector Blowdown first before bomb, because that's really the most important ability you want to use every time when it's ready. That's your biggest damage dealer. Next up about the devices. So while doing all of this, you're gonna keep spamming your devices as well so that your turrets drop all the time. Now there's people macroing this. I'm not gonna support or adhere macroing, but if you really need that to play decent, then please at least do, so that you don't deliver some shit performance on a meta class. But basically always spam your turrets whenever, so that they easily drop. I've seen people already that use their turrets and then they have to pick a spot. Quick tip here guys, when you go to interface, you can use instant area targeting option. When you have this off and you want to do turrets, you will see that you have to use it and then click again to drop it, which is gonna really be annoying to click all the time when you want to drop it. I have this simply on, I apply, accept, and then whenever I use the ability, it's gonna drop it where my mouse cursor is at that time. I don't have to click again. I think this is some tip that some of you guys will appreciate, because not everybody has been using this, especially new players. This might be useful. So then you always go with the bombs, and you want to focus on rotating 2 shots to remove stacks, Rector Blowdown, and then 2 of the other stacks to remove stacks, and then the Blowdown, and so on and forth. During all of this, you're gonna drop Colossus as well. Colossus is your tier ability for the monster robot thingy. What you want to do here is pop Master Plan, because Master Plan is going to apply the stats on the Colossus separately, which is going to buff him and you yourself and your party. And then you want to target him and use this racial ability, Magic Injection. This is going to apply the power buff to the Colossus. Why we do this is because he's not getting the buff from the support. So when you have a support in your group and he's buffing power or valiance, your Colossus is not gonna get that buff. You have to explicitly apply this to him yourself. This might get tricky to do when it's chaotic, when a lot of stuff is going on. When you have multiple Colossus, it's hard to see which one is yours because they don't have an indicator of which one is whose. But basically you want to try to, after dropping Colossus, use your master plan and then use your magic injection to buff him up so that you're gonna have the optimal damage DPS that way. So what we want to do here is you have your normal rotation going on. I drop the Colossus, I wait for him to actually drop on the floor till I see him, then I put master plan, target him, and then magic injection. That's how you do the maximum damage for your Colossus. You will see here your Colossus is gonna go up in damage a lot. Basically, Engineer class is getting carried a lot by its devices, by its mechanics. As you can see, the top damage dealers are your devices, except for the Blowdown, because like I said, Blowdown does a lot of damage, especially the physical damage type. I'm not sure why the physical damage type is heavily favored over the natural damage type, Rector Blowdown. That's really important to know that you can play like this with the Colossus, because the Colossus does add a lot of DPS, especially at the beginning with buffing up Master Plan and the Magic Injection. If you have a Bard support, then you can also use that person to stack up Master Plan and Victory Hymn, because they both apply the bonus to the whole party, including to the Colossus up. Yeah, that's really it about the Colossus part. That's quite a big tip for you guys to do. So that's about the gameplay rotation. You use always the 2 bombs while spamming your turrets, and then you simply consume the stacks by using the same volley in pairs each time. Try to not mix up your volleys, because if you mix up your volleys, you will see you'll never get to your 200 heat or cooling, so you'll never be able to use Vector Blowdown, and that's your biggest damage dealer. And then next up we have our artifacts. Now for artifacts, of course, as an engineer, I would recommend Victory Cross as high as you can. Of course in 12.0 the artifacts are going to be removed, and you'll see by default which artifacts are good for you, and you're going to switch a lot from different artifacts. But now about pre-12.0 we're going to speak about Cross, of course. Then next up we have Dragon Aspis. More defense is always good, especially against AoEs. It's not going to increase any damage, but it's going to help you survive AoEs better. Really recommended this. And then you have here this one that I would recommend is the Unity Trichotrim. It's basically the support artifact, because engineers can also play support. That's a big plus on that. But the main reason why I had this made before the patch came that buffed the turrets was acid turrets. So when you would have this artifact equipped and you had acid turrets, acid turrets is an AoE attack, so every time they would attack they would apply this buff, United in Death, which makes incoming area of effects damage increase. Basically, as you can see here, level 5 dealing area damage applies the United in Death effect to victims, which increases AoE they take from all sources, so not only from you but from everything in your party, by 1%, stacks up to 10 times, so up to 10% for 4 seconds. So that was a really big bonus that we could do. This is still a big bonus for AoE, because you can have this equipped with your Cross and Aspis. And then when you use Acid Turret on AoE, everything it hits is gonna get that debuff that's gonna allow them to take 10% more AoE damage on top of everything else. So that's a really good big bonus. Aside from that, the other artifacts are not really recommended for DPS. You can always make the other ones and use them as well for their abilities. But these are the main ones I would recommend for DPSing, because that's going to end up a lot that way. Like I said, if you're going to use more light turrets and you want to go optimize as much as you can, then obviously I would switch to something else that would increase your sustainability or surviving, self-healing and whatnot. So that is everything for the artifacts. Then for racials and word mysteries, now like I showed you before, the racial I'm using is Magic Injection for the Colossus to push some extra DPS. Really handy to do that. Another racial that I'm using, because this is gonna be only used for Colossus, so it has only 1 minute cooldown because it's a racial. but the Colossus has 5 minutes, I believe, cooldown. And so in those other 4 minutes, you obviously have another racial you can use, and for that I use Flash Charge. Flash Charge is something I use a lot for when we change CC monsters in Heroics, where I usually go with Spider, and then the CC for a few seconds, then I go IDOS Fire. So IDOS Fire is something you can get from the Order Prestige. Then I use Flash Charge mostly, so it gives them another 3 seconds fear for everything in front of me, and then I usually reload and then Spider again to do another 3 seconds fear, and then I tell my group that I'm done CCing, then the other people can do the same thing. So that's something really useful for Flash Charge. Now some people also like to use the bomb, the Firecracker. Now I don't like Firecracker because it does give you more visibility of hitting your target with the CC, because you just throw it there, but it only hits up to 3 enemies, so that's a limited ratio, and it only lasts for 2 seconds as well. Here the CC is 3 seconds, so you win another second with that. And another quite important thing is that when you want to reapply long CC on monsters and they're below 90%, this one will just fear them and that's it. You can long CC them again, that's no problem. But with Firecracker, it also applies a damage over time, so when they're below 90% and you long CC them, this still does some damage over time and then breaks them right after that. And I had this quite often happen to me. So I can tell you with certainty that Firecracker is an annoying ability to use as a crowd control racial ability. Only 2 racial abilities I recommend is Flash Charge for the crowd control in between when you don't have Magic Injection. A Magic Injection of course has priority for your damage that you deal because of your Colossus that you have, which you can only do once every 5 seconds. Now other racials you have, I believe, are Adrenaline. Now Adrenaline just increases the vitality and the bloodlust. I'm really recommending you not to use this. Actually this is a Warp Mystery, but the Warp Mystery I recommend you to use is the Master Plan, because that's the other Warp Mystery you have, because you always have to, and they do share cooldown, so when you use this one goes on cooldown as well. And obviously bloodlust / vitality for 150 is not going to add any damage, it's not going to add anything for the tank either. It's only 10 seconds, it's not going to do anything. The damage, on the other hand, is going to add a lot, 70 for each stat in your base for 10 seconds. Plus the Colossus on top of that is going to be a lot of a big game changer. And I think that's it for the ratios. Now there's other ratios that applies Valiance to your party. This is useless, like I said, because you have a support that does it for you already. Either Power or Valiance. And then you have, that's it. One more important thing that I learned not too long ago is that you only have this in your spellbook. You probably already seen it, disabling the mechanisms. This is an ability you basically have by default already, and this is really useful in mazes. So what I usually do is I have it put up here so I can have it quickly accessible. So when you have your turrets up, right, and you want to remove everything quickly, use this ability that destroys everything, including the Colossus. And it has no cooldown, you can really spam it, so it's always up to do this. Now why do I use this? For the Headhunters. So Headhunter is a mob in Maze that reflects all the damage you deal back to you if he uses something called Deceit on you. So I have these turrets stacking up to help me DPSing, of course, because I'm getting carried by our turrets. Now when he happens to do this, to cast his ability on me, also your turrets are going to reflect the damage on you, basically killing you in the first half split second when he does that. So when you see him casting this on you, you simply go to that ability, remove everything, and you're safe. That's the really most useful thing I have found for that ability, to have to use optimal damage in the mazes on Headhunters. They should also do some mechanics like that for other classes such as the Summoner or the Druid, or any other class that has damage over times going on, so you can quickly remove those damage over times, because that's a really useful ability that you have to simply give you more control on when you do damage and how you deal damage. So that's really amazing. I like that Engineer has that. It's quite new for me, never knew that. Also when, for example, your turrets are attacking the rogue target, even though you have heat signature Ruby and they're about to break free, a long CC mob that really can't happen, Your emergency stop break is here. Use it, guys. It's off combo cooldown. It has no cooldown as long as 1 second. You cancel your turrets and your party is safe. So just know that that's there in your spellbook. So that's again everything I could think of to tell you guys about the Engineer DPS role. I hope you guys learned something once more. If you have more questions, please let me know down below in the comments. I will be glad to answer you guys. As usual, if you like the video, if you like the guides that I make, give it a like, guys. If you want to see more content about Allods Online or about what I make for you guys, then simply hit subscribe and you'll be notified when something new goes live. I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you for watching and stay cool. Bye bye.